Well, hello and welcome to the Bumper to Bumper podcast. I'm Dave Riccio, co-creator of Bumper to Bumper Radio and your host of the Bumper to Bumper podcast. I'm joined by my co-host, John Riggle. Together with 75 years of combined experience, we are putting you in the know when it comes to your car. John, one of the most common things that I see in the auto repair shop that's recommended, I think they recommend them pretty often,
What's that?
fuel injection service.
Oh boy. Yeah.
What is fuel injection service?
Yeah.
And I think it's almost like I don't know. Sometimes it could be a placebo. Oh yeah, I got my fuel injector serviced and it's feeling better. I don't know, but fuel injection service that's really changed over the years. So back when I started in the business, and I started in really like 1996. Man, just to put a little time in there. But fuel injection service then meant something totally different than it means now. But fuel injection service, and I think we got to define that. There's fuel injection service, and we'll get to all of them, but there's fuel injection service, there's induction service, and there's throttle body service. So there's three things. Let's take them from the top. Fuel injection service.
Yeah.
What is a fuel injection service, maybe traditionally versus what it is today?
Yeah. Traditionally, what we used to do is we used to disconnect the fuel rails. We'd hook a machine up that actually flushed a chemical through the injector lines and recirculated that cleaner through there while we operated the injectors to try to clean out the deposits that would form on the tips of the injectors. That's originally where fuel injection cleaning came from. It was an attempt to take the olefin deposits, which is like a tarry wax that builds up on the end of the injectors after the cars were shut off. As soon as you shut the injector off, you'd always have a little drop of fuel right there on the tip of the injector, and that would kind of bake onto the end of the injector. And so that's where it came from. And that was a fuel injection flusher service, was doing that particular move and cleaning those out. There were different ways to do it, but we used a car that did an on-car flush. You could pull the injectors off and put them in an off-car machine and do it too.
Right.
Entailed a lot more work.
So, okay, so that's fuel injection service originally back in the day. And a fuel injector is basically a spray nozzle that's going to shoot gasoline or spray gasoline into, in the old days, it was behind the intake valve.
Yeah.
Modern day, we'll talk about that, direct injection, but it's going to spray fuel into the engine where the combustion happens. And cars can run bad as injectors get plugged or as injectors start to malfunction. Some of the stumbling and rough running and maybe just lack of performance can kind of come up from fuel injectors getting dirty or plugged or that kind of thing. So direct injection. So you're talking about, back in the day we had throttle body injection or direct port injection.
Right.
And those needed to be cleaned, and that's really changed. So let's fast forward to a 2020 car. In most cases is direct injection. Which is totally, in a lot of ways, different.
Yeah.
So direct injection, are you seeing the need for servicing those?
Well, see, I'm struggling with that one because that can be a regional thing too. The amount of deposits that wind up injectors have to do with temperature, the fuel quality. There's a lot of things like that vary. But here where we're at in Phoenix, I really don't see that many fuel quality issues, right? So the other thing is we're talking about direct injection, fuel injection now. With port fuel injection, we used to spray the fuel right at the back of the intake valve, in the intake manifolds. We were spraying into essentially a low pressure zone and kind of drawing that fuel through there, and that fuel would run across the back of the intake valve and clean the back of the intake valve, take some of the carbon off, in addition to cleaning the nozzle and the injector. With port fuel or with direct fuel injection, the injectors go straight into the combustion chamber, just like a diesel does. So spraying fuel through those will clean those injectors. However, I don't really see that many plugged or restricted direct injectors, right?
At least in our region.
In our region, I just don't see them. I see broken ones. I see ones that leak.
Leaking.
Mechanical failures that flushing isn't really going to help you. So I'm a little torn on flushing directed fuel injection systems just because I don't know that there's a ton of value in it.
And the other thing too is the fuels have changed. So we've got the modern top tier fuel. You know, you go to Chevron and any of these name brands, they're good fuels. Chevron comes with Techron in it right off the bat, so it's already got a cleaner in it that's designed to clean as it's working.
Right.
And I'm not a chemist, so I don't know all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I know top tier fuels certainly changed the game versus the fuels we were talking about when, you know, back in the day. I mean, fuel pressure for a fuel injection system was probably 35 psi, 35 to 50, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
In the modern direct injection is different. How many psi are we doing on the modern?
I don't know. It varies, but 600-700 pounds.
Yeah, so it's quite a bit different than it used to be. So so fuel injection service, that's one thing that we want to talk about. But now you're at the auto shop and they tell you need a 3-part cleaning, right? So but the next thing is induction service.
Right.
So that's the induction of the air into the system.
Right.
Is that?
Yeah. So we have a couple of things that affect this. So when you're talking about injectors can get restricted. You can have material build up in the nozzles and wind up with them being restricted. The other thing you have on the inlet of most fuel injectors is a screen. And we can have situations where we get silt, rust, things like that will restrict that screen in that injector. So hopefully your injection flush will clean some of that out. My experience has been if it's the silty rust, the only thing that cleans that out is taking the fuel rails out, taking the screens out, actually cleaning the screens and replacing them or putting them back in. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of this whole thing that we wind up with is carbon on the back of the intake valves. That is a big deal with direct injected cars. Because with port fuel, we always sprayed fuel on the back of the intake valves. That helps keep the back of the intake valves clean and prevents a carbon buildup on the valve stems. With the direct injected cars, there's nothing to wash that fuel off of there or those deposits off there. And those deposits come from a couple different places too, because we're always recirculating crankcase vapor back into the intake. So we have that crankcase vapor condenses on the back of the valves and we get carbon and build up on the back of the valves. But using an injector cleaner won't clean that off.
Nope.
Okay, so what we have to do is some type of injection service. That can go a couple of different ways. You can mist a chemical through the intake manifold to try to get it on the back of the intake valves. Okay. That may or may not work sometimes.
Right.
We find that when we have the direct injected cars that have significant amounts of carbon, the only way to get it off is pull the intake manifold off and use walnut shells or something like that to blast the back of the valves and clean the stuff off. So the induction service is an attempt to clean out some of that carbon out of the intake manifold off the back of the valves, things like that. So we've got injection flush, induction service.
Okay, and then the last one that I want to bring up, this one I see quite a bit, and it seems like it's something that is definitely a good idea, but throttle body service.
Yeah.
So throttle body, when you give your car throttle with the gas pedal, there's a big butterfly in a throat that's going to open up and let air into the engine. And so a throttle body service, and that's where your idle speed comes from. So that valve opens and closes based off throttle, but when you're off the gas, when you're sitting at a stoplight, there's just a little bit of opening right there.
Yeah. So what we want to do is with the throttle, when we're idle, we need to have some air bypassing the throttle so that the car will idle. But we're also using computer controls to either open and close the throttle valve a little bit and maintain a consistent idle speed. We always have things like an air conditioning compressor coming on and off, your foot's on and off, the brake changes the load. So we want to maintain a nice steady idle speed. So we always have to have a little bit of bypass air. Just in case the system should fail for any reason, we want the car to be able to idle at a specific base idle speed. So what happens over a period of time, carbon builds up around that, and sometimes it's fuel reversion deposits, all kinds of, it's not necessarily just carbon, but we have material that will build up around those throttle blades. When that chokes off that bypass air, now we wind up in a situation where when we come up to a stop or we're in a decel, we may not have enough bypass air when that throttle is fully closed to keep the engine running. So we wind up with these situations where we wind up with cars that stall with a lot of times they have no codes in them. They just stall. They start right back up, and you see that. And a lot of times that's because of the deposits on the back of the throttle body. But this brings up an interesting point because most of these have adaptives, right? They adjust over a period of time. So they know they're getting carboned up. So they got to keep opening that throttle blade. What happens sometimes, we change a battery in the car.
Oh, yeah.
And it happens to me all the time. We have cars come in here. We do a transmission service or, repair. We have to disconnect a battery cable. We put it back on. Now the car's got this real low idle speed. I either have to go in and relearn the idle or a lot of times I have to clean the throttle body to get the carbon out to get them to relearn and operate properly when we're done.
So throttle body service, I would say that's probably out of the list of 3. I mean, well, they're all important. Induction service is certainly important. Now, going back to, not to jump too far backwards, but going back to induction service, you talked about, when the car is new and you're doing induction service, I think it helps. But if you're, I don't know, 70 years old and you decide to start taking your vitamins, that's when we're talking about, hey, now we got to mechanically move the carbon from the valves.
And you have to make kind of a distinction. There's two things that happen with that carbon on the back of the valves. You have soft carbon and you have hard carbon. The hard carbon, you won't get that off with anything other than a scraper or, like I said, walnut shells, something like that. So the soft carbon is kind of a little bit easier to remove chemically. Now, here's the other thing that with a port fuel injection car, if you periodically did an on-car injector flush, you would increase the amount of time that it took for the carbon to build up. So as a preventative maintenance thing, it's probably good. I've had mixed results with cleaning fuel injectors on cars and trying to fix roughness and stuff. A lot of times it's just kind of, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on exactly on what you're chasing and why. But as a PM service on the earlier cars, it's good. Well, if you're driving a late model with direct injection, not going to do you much good, really. Yeah, because we don't see that many. I don't see restricted injectors very often on. When they fail, they fail. They break.
In our part of the country, and that's such an interesting thing is that depending on the region, we see different repairs.
Oh yeah.
Here it's baking hot. I mean, it's gonna. I think we hit 112 degrees today, or something ridiculous like that, and we haven't even begun.
Oh, back in the day with Multec fuel injectors, I used to argue on the internet with the guys in California. We would see shorted injectors, and they would come out and go, "No, you mean open?" And I'm like, "No, we don't see short. They're shorted." And they're like, "No, they go open," and we're like back and forth. And we finally figured out that it was actually a regional thing. It was the way the fuels were attacking the seals in not really seals, but the way they're pressed together. Some of the fuels would migrate into the coils for the injectors, and so they would, go open circuit or short depending on where you were at in the country. So it was a weird deal.
Well, fuel injection service. Induction service and throttle body, something that if you've been in an auto repair shop, you've been recommended at some point. So that's what it is. Do you need it? I don't know. Up to you. How do you feel about it? Thanks for joining us. Well, hello, I'm Dave Riccio, your host of the Bumper to Bumper podcast, and I would like to thank you for tuning in. If you want one of your car questions to be answered on our podcast, tap the link in the description for a chance to have your question featured. And while you are there, we would love for you to like and subscribe to see more Bumper to Bumper podcasts in the future.